Hey folks, Mike Naso here with a 5 p.m. update on Hurricane Idalia headed for the west coast of Florida. When we take a look at the satellite imagery, we have a strengthening hurricane on our hands. It is now a Category 2 storm with winds of 100 miles per hour. Look at that satellite. A lot of energy being forced there in the direction of the Big Bend and the west coast of Florida. Here is the latest on Idalia as of 5 p.m. Eastern Time from the National Hurricane Center. The center of the hurricane was at 26.1 north, 84.8 west, and it is moving to the north at 16 miles per hour, so it's starting to accelerate. Remember, yesterday it was moving very slowly, maybe 7 miles per hour. Not anymore, and that's expected to continue, and it will bring the center of the hurricane ashore along the area of the Big Bend sometime on Wednesday morning. The pressure recorded by the Air Force Hurricane Hunter aircraft, all those guys, the NOAA aircrafts have been flying the last few days, the Air Force aircrafts, 972 millibars. Now, the winds are up to 100 miles per hour. This makes it a Category 2 hurricane. It is forecast to continue to strengthen, possibly as high as, say, 120, 130 miles an hour, coming ashore somewhere as a Category 3 hurricane along the Big Bend area there of Florida. Here's the visible satellite, and boy, this is an impressive looking storm. We're finally seeing that bubbling around the core. It's a tight hurricane. It's not gigantic, but it does have that inner core of strong winds, and that's where it is building with the eye wall there, and that is an indicator that is going to continue to intensify. The water temperatures, forget about it. They're very, very hot, and the upper level winds, look at the wind shear, much more favorable around the system. A high pressure aloft, the anticyclone, that is a much more favorable wind shear pattern than what we saw about 36 to 48 hours ago. All of this, the favorable wind shear, the favorable hot waters of the Gulf, not good news for intensification. We're going to see this storm strengthen beyond the 100 mile per hour Cat 2 into a Category 3 major hurricane. As Dr. Phil Klotzbach said on Twitter, we have not had a major Category 4 or 5 hurricane in this area of the Big Bend, so here's hoping it remains lower than a Category 4. But I should note that the last time they really had a direct major hurricane impact that we were looking at in the archives was 1896. There is an indication that they had one up in the Appalachian Bay area, maybe about 1843. In 1843, so you're talking 180 years ago. This is a very strange concave area that just doesn't get a lot of powerful hurricanes. They either go Apalachicola west or Tarpon Springs south. They don't usually go in that area there. And so if you're in that area and you haven't evacuated, listen to your local officials. Make sure you get to higher ground, because the main threat is going to be the water. Here's the radar imagery, and again, the eye's still having trouble clearing out there, but you can see the eye getting closer and closer in the radar range, and it's in that direction. We also have storms moving through. If you look over Lake Okeechobee, you guys got some storms blowing through. That's going to head right across the peninsula towards Port St. Lucie. We're also going to have storms moving up the Villages, Orlando. You guys are going to get in on some of the action. So even though the hurricane is going to make landfall on Wednesday morning in the Big Bend, that does not mean you can't have impacts further south. We already see some water rises as far south as Fort Myers Beach, which was destroyed less than 12 months ago by Category 4 Hurricane Ian. Now, as I mentioned, rainfall will be a problem. We're going to see this system push in. It's going to go across Georgia, the Carolinas. It's going to come back offshore. And believe it or not, we might actually have to deal with it coming back west eventually underneath building high pressure. But we're going to get to that when that occurs. We're not going to deal with that right now. However, the storm surge is the real threat here. Areas like Yankeetown, near Appalachia Bay, the Steinhatchee River region, the Suwannee River, 10 to 15 feet of storm surge. I cannot stress enough. These areas are very susceptible to high surge. We saw what happened with Hurricane Ian on Sanibel and Captiva and Fort Myers Beach last year. Same type of deal here. 10 to 15 feet of water with 125-mile-an-hour winds and crashing waves on top of it, you ain't going to survive that. You could hide from the wind. The building codes are great for the wind, but you cannot hide from water. And a lot of those areas are dangerous barrier islands. Cedar Key, you know, that's, if water overtakes that, there's nowhere really for you to go. There's a lot of nature preserves and stuff out there. You know, that's all going to be inundated. So even though that's better population-wise, I don't want to offend anybody who might live in Perry, but compared to Miami or Fort Myers, there's not as much population. It's still towns, homes, businesses, and people. And if you're there, your life is at risk from the high water. So we're going to watch it very carefully. Here's another look. Look at the water vapor imagery. There is some dry air here to the northwest of the hurricane. So it's not an ideal environment. I mean, I've seen a lot better, but it's enough to where this thing could become a major hurricane and a Category 3 major hurricane landfall. It doesn't happen every year, and it certainly doesn't happen very often in this area of Florida of the Big Bend. So we're going to watch it very, very carefully. Stay tuned for further updates. I'll be back with frequent updates as Hurricane Idalia moves closer. We're not going to talk about the other storms out there. We have Franklin spinning. We have a tropical depression in the Atlantic. So the tropics remain active with the landfall of a major hurricane along the west coast of Florida tomorrow morning.